Thank you, Nid. Thank you very much, and really appreciate for you taking the time out to moderate. So huge thanks to you as well. But also, big thanks to the organizers, Vesa, Adam, Sharon, Matty, and every others. So it takes a huge effort, and as you can see from the keynote, which was again great tone of things that's happening in the Microsoft space. All the talks around the AI, right? So hence my session, which I put together, kind of covers through some of those aspects of the AI in particular when it comes to working with our content. So when we talk about documents, billions of documents are being created every day across the globe for different organizations. And it's been happening for a long time, right? So now, or certainly for the last few years, a lot of the AI capabilities are being infused in variety of the experiences, whether you're in Teams or Word, Excel, or even in SharePoint. So my session is going to cover the content AI aspects of it, and you can see on my title slide when I originally submitted this session, it was a lot of it was talking through, and of course a lot of demos today, so very few slides, but was about SharePoint Premium, and the name itself is kind of not really being used actively, but all the capabilities for some of you who might be familiar, they're still there, right? They're still active. They still work seamlessly the way they have been in the past. But of course, now, we refer a lot of these capabilities, the document processing side of things. So hence the strikeout here for SharePoint Premium. So when you do look for some of the content materials, you'll probably find very little reference on SharePoint Premium other than the old blog articles and so on. So what we'll look at, of course, is when we're working with our files within SharePoint or accessing through Teams, we're generally concerned with the most critical content. And I get it, there is Copilot for some of you who might be eligible with your Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses. Yeah, for sure, you can create your SharePoint agents. You can go and ask the questions, respond, and so on, right? So that's all there. That's all good. But the focus is not so much around that. It's the focus for me today is more around how you can then leverage existing content that you've got to try and extract and also try and build workflows around it to be able to then classify, tag, and all the wonderful things that we can do within SharePoint. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chirag Patel. Live and work in London, UK. I work with Patel Consulting. Kind of been doing this for about 25 odd years. Started off as a SQL Server DBA and really kind of morphed into SharePoint at the time back in 2002, really. So for me, I'm kind of really honored around the fact that I've seen the journey and also working with a lot of wonderful folks over the years, and then be able to work with various Microsoft partners and carrying out migrations, deployments, or simply just leveraging the existing Microsoft 365 capabilities, and also the work around Microsoft Purview compliance and policies and everything else. So my work revolves a lot of it around those capabilities and really kind of just taking organizations from one level to another. So of course, I love speaking at many community events, and I'm also an organizer for M365 UK. So partly for those efforts, I've been recognized for six times over the last 6 years as an MVP in the M365 category. But also, I tend to assess a lot of applications for the good practice of IT industry, for awarding the chartered membership. So I'm usually part of the application process within that. So there's my QR code. feel free to connect, and if I'm able to help you out or answer your questions, and if you want to be part of the MVP journey, happy to support you and or at least point somebody who might be able to help you out. So feel free to connect. So when we handle our documents, albeit whether it's in OneDrive, SharePoint, doesn't matter wherever it is, right? Typically it's kind of given now, that whatever the systems you use, you just want to make sure that AI is already baked in, right? Otherwise, you can see all the stats and all the headlines and industries that are making around, then you're kind of really uh, falling behind with the existing systems that you have. So a lot of the capability that we now have, leveraging the content management aspects of it, is quite good, it's matured. Yes, there are some clunky experiences, and that's just my opinion around some of these things, but these things are evolving, right? So it's never going to be a fully finished product other than the actual capabilities themselves are set in there. So, you know, examples could be things like if you want to generate documents in bulk, right? How would you go and do that easily without just copying and pasting it and so on? So there are better tools to help you achieve those kind of goals. If you got a lot of documents coming in, whether that's contracts, whether that's receipts, invoices, or whatever it is, how do you go about making sure that those are processed in a large scale manner and applying the necessary tagging or classifying them for security and compliance purposes without having that manual efforts that goes into this maintaining these kind of systems. So you got those things, but then the other side of that, of course, is how do you go about then extracting the key pieces of information within your Word documents, right? So again, we want to try and get some intelligence out of that, and this can be automated, which is the good thing about it. And so, all these aspects of content management comes into various capabilities. So, when we look at it from accessing these kind of capabilities, we're talking about the pay-as-you-go model that you have to have that set up in order to then be able to leverage the necessary capabilities within your SharePoint environment. Of course, one thing I do want to say though, that if you got all the AI capabilities, and yes, it's a lot more better than search, then why would you bother with tagging? Why would you bother with classifying if AI can do all the job? AI does need some context with a lot of these things as you come to know this, right? And of course, a lot of it does depend how good and clean your data is. And of course, everything does respect your permissions, security that you may already have set up. And of course, if that's not been managed properly, then AI is just another tool that's always just going to extract whatever it has access to your content. So just bear that in mind. But the end goal here is that we want to be able to extract the necessary knowledge and be able to then action, make decisions, and make informed decisions to the teams, colleagues, partners, and everybody else. So I'll focus the first part of this presentation around the document processing side of things. The second part, as some of you saw the in the keynote, the knowledge management, the knowledge agent rather, that kind of came out last week in public preview. So I've got some of those things to show you as well. So then hopefully at the end of the sessions, you will get a good grasp of what these capabilities are, how you could potentially use to apply that in your environment and then be able to try it out or take it forward and try it out with few critical content that you may have in your SharePoint. So there's a number of components really within the document processing side of things, and we're going to dive into each, well, for most of these things anyways, through the demos itself. So we'll kind of reference this slide as and when we go to the dive side of things. But from a summary point of view, When we're talking about autofill columns, some of you probably have seen that, and if you've set up a metadata structures or through the good content management governance, then we can take advantage of that capability to have the necessary information populated, not just within the content AI capability, such as the old name, which was the syntax, so on, but also with the knowledge agent as well, right? Yes, you can also have translations of your existing documents. So there's few languages there. We'll take a look at that. And then, of course, just last week, I believe, the e-signature is kind of available to all the organizations, generally available. It was always available before anyways, but it's gone with a wider reach. So, you're able to then have all your documents, a bit like DocuSign really, but all the content essentially is still inside your Microsoft 365 boundaries. So that content never kind of leaves outside of that boundary. So, that's the big plus of it. And of course, you can have that workflow in there for the necessary e-signatures for your contracts or any documents within that. We'll look at some of the, and I'll skip the optical character recognition bit, just kind of, using the old technology that we have to recognize anything that you have maybe in pictures or whatever it is and be able to then have necessary information extracted. But we'll look at how you can also go about assemble a particular document that's repetitive in nature, right? Whether that's the letters that you write out or whether that's contracts, agreements, any kind of scenario that you can think of, we can have them created in a bulk fashion and be able to then have that process in place through the content assembly. If you're storing images, that's another one. You can have necessary based on the image objects, the keywords, the necessary text extracted out in form of a tagging system. So that's through the SharePoint site columns. And we know that the more site columns we have, the more better the search capabilities are. And then in turn, of course, better results through the AI when it comes to harnessing all the information that you store in your images or through your SharePoint systems. There's few models. You can also take advantage of building it and deploying it out to few SharePoint sites or maybe all the SharePoint sites. It's your choice, very flexible. And with some of these things, you can then go about going to the more detail, and we will look this in more detail, of course, how you could go about building and train that particular model so that your documents can be able to extract a lot of the good value from this document into the SharePoint environment. So that's what we're going to cover off from a content AI perspective. And then I've just got a couple of slides just to kind of, to mention about pay-as-you-go services, as I mentioned just then. So in order to make this work in your Microsoft 365 environment, of course, the major capabilities you have is, of course, the SharePoint agents. And if you've got the Microsoft 365 Copilot license, then, well, you're already well ahead to start building and using your SharePoint agents. But the remainder of the three, the document processing, which is the previous slide that I referred to, that's part of the pay-as-you-go, right? That's not really your Microsoft 365 Copilot. Although some of the experience might seem familiar in territory of Copilot. And then you got things like archiving and backing up your SharePoint sites. So as part of that pay-as-you-go service, these things get switched on. And of course, you can either have that switched on or off so that, you don't want to probably use it all at once. So you have that granular flexibility. So very quickly, in terms of how you go about setting this up, so of course, you'll need to work with your tenant administrator, whoever's looking after your Microsoft Azure environment. So you will need to have a subscription, Azure subscription, and then subsequently a resource group in which you can then start to take advantage of your in this case, particular syntax side of things, as it's normally as it's known as, and then be able to then switch on and off through various means to be able to start using it. So SharePoint Administrator, once you go into the SharePoint side of things, but also the global admin. I mean, of course, the least permissions, the better. And then, of course, if you do happen to do the resource group and Azure subscription management, then of course you will need the owner and contributor rights for that. So let's take a look quickly on this part. So if I go over to my Microsoft 365 Admin Center, so this is my dev tenant that I've got here, and then in there, I'm going to go to the setup side of things. So typically, I love this setup screen itself. So whenever new services come on board in your Microsoft 365, definitely take a look at this. I mean, you can go directly to any particular pages you want, and to be able to connect with these things extra as separate services. But where we want to go down here is in the file management side of things, right? So did I miss that? I think. There we go. So meetings, voice, device, billings. Oh, there we go. So in the billing and licenses, activate pay-as-you-go services. So once you go in there, then I can just go and click on that. And of course, if you haven't already set this up, you will get some new wizards in there. But really, this particular pay-as-you-go service is for both content AI side of things, as it's detailed at the bottom there, which is called basically agents in SharePoint or syntax and other services. So if I go ahead and click on Get Started, and because I've already set up my Azure subscription in Entra ID, so that's already kind of coming through into my M365 admin. And so you can see here in the billing side of things, I've got syntax services. So all this is basically doing is basically getting that activated in the first place. So you can see that my subscription in this case is my Visual Studio Enterprise subscription, the billing information and all that stuff within that. And of course, then the SharePoint Premium, which is what I've called it for my resource group, to be able to set up this pay-as-you-go. So this is all connected and all set up. Of course, there is that disconnect at the top, which I'm not going to do that. But if you did want to manage that, then that's how you would do this, your initial steps to get up and running. So that's within the admin center, right? So once you got that set up, then you want to go into the individual settings. So really, what you're seeing here is the settings across your tenant, right? So, like I mentioned in the couple of slides ago, all the capabilities you have for your document processing, things like autofill columns, content assembly, eSignature, and so on. So I can go into each one of these to configure and ensure that do I want to make this feature available to either all the libraries in all the SharePoint sites, or maybe have few, right? So you have that option, okay? Obviously, initially, when you do start this out, start small and then obviously build up as you go more to it. So we'll go through some of these things when it comes to the demo, but essentially it's the on-off switch really. So if they're on, they will show up in all my sites. So I've done that for all my SharePoint sites in this case. So whenever I create one or use existing one, that's going to be there for me. And then just quickly on that one, storage, this is the same because I'm in the pay-as-you-go services side of things, so I can still go and turn that on or off, right, for archive and backups. So then I can start doing things for my SharePoint sites for long-term storage and so on. So that's the admin side of things from within this part. So within that, we kind of just went through very, very quickly on that part. And the content assembly, again, which I'm going to go through in a second, is basically just going to talk about how you can then basically roll that out to be able to build your documents through that feature that's switched on, right? The e-signature, which is in here, it's got slightly more options. So again, as part of that document processing side of things, do you want people in your organization to use this e-signature? And of course, whoever uses it, every request is chargeable. And I've got a slide on the pricing side of things, so we'll take a look at that later. But here for the SharePoint e-signature, you still have that integration opportunity, whether you want to connect with Adobe eSignature or DocuSign, and some of you might be already using those services as well. So you have that capability and still be able to control where eSignature appears as a capability in which SharePoint sites. So you can still control that very easily. All right. So let's take a look at the autofill columns side of things. So if I go to my demo site now, and okay, so in here, I'm going to come out of the admin. I don't think we need that, so we can close that off. So I've got just a plain team site here called project. And you can see on my left-hand side, I've got a few demos as menu links in there. So, if I go into my samples autofill there, right? So it's a sample document library, a few documents in there, which I've already uploaded. And you can see there's, a few columns already, right? Things like, excuse me, product tags. Then there's the processing status once I've enabled the autofill in here. So if I was to go in here when I set this up, is I will go into the column settings, just like you normally would do in your existing document library. So what happens is that back in the admin center, when I turn that feature on for autofill, it then makes this column more richer in order to have you the autofill to turn it on, right? And then of course it goes further down as to what's the prompt you want to be asking to your documents so that the necessary information is extracted. So this is slightly manual compared to the knowledge agent when we take a look at that later. But for now, you're in total control as to exactly what prompt you want to put in so that only hopefully the rightful information comes out. So in this case, I've kind of said, extract all the product tags mentioned in the document, list them as comma separated, because I might want to then do some clever stuff with it and be able to, translate that into some Excel and so on, right? And then of course, if there's no product tags, then just say not found. So you can refine that prompt to your requirements. And then like with everything else, you want to try and give a bit of a life around this. So you would put a test file in there. So I've picked up a HR benefits document to be able to work with that. So that's all I'm doing there as far as the column configuration is concerned. But once you've got that set up, then you're kind of ready to use. So whenever you create a new document or you upload a new document, it will then go and start automatically do that for you. So let me grab a document from my file system here in the good old Explorer. So, and don't worry, you can't see this, so that's fine. I'm just going to go and grab a file and just put it in there. So if I go and grab, there's a file called product overview. So I'm just going to bring that in here, click and drag and drop. File is already, that's fine. Keep both. I think there's a file there already that exists. There we go. So I'm just just added a new file as I would normally would do. If I uploaded a bulk load of files, the behavior is the same as well. So at the moment, product tags is nothing, but we'll give some seconds, minutes perhaps, and then we will come back and have a look at that particular tagging itself. When it is there, of course, it's just going to magically just appear, right? It's a simple user experience as far as that's concerned. So we'll come to this autofill in a minute. What I'll do is I'll go over to another document library called images, right? Very similar concept there in terms of the tagging wise. Of course, this is more for image tagging itself when this has been turned on. So again, if I go and grab another image from my file system, so let me do that now. And I've got an image called MVP plane, which is what I've used before when I've been to Seattle, and just uploading the AI generated image that I have with the Microsoft logo and things on it. So, if I click on that particular one, then that's roughly the image, Seattle, Microsoft plane, and so forth, right? So we'll have a look at that once that's kind of done, but we'll see what it comes back with. Again, we'll give a few minutes before it kind of decides to come back with more tags in there. But again, you can see, right, the ease of using this from the moment when the admin controls are switched on. Users will just come straight in here, do their creation, uploading files, and then the AI side of things takes care of it. So let's go back to samples autofill. So there we goes. No, no. Let me sort that in newer to, there we go. That's better. So that's the file that I uploaded 2 minutes ago, and there we go. Product tags already in there, right? So whatever it's in that, whatever is in that document, it's going to try and make its best guess to bring all the product tags. I could have limited to say, you know what, just give me 3 tags. You can do that, right? Because you don't want to really overkill this a lot of the times. So that was the first autofill example, and then we've got the images. Hopefully that's taken care of as well. So see if our MVP plane, nope, that's still not there. So we'll give that some time. But while that's doing, we'll kind of just go over to the other processing services. So I've talked about the pre-built models. So, these are the models. This is basically kind of working through either they're structured free form or literally just training your documents. But we're not talking about hundreds of thousands here, right? We're only talking about something like 5 documents in which you can then try and hopefully make sense of it by training it through the wizard that we will see in a second, and then be able to build your model and of course test it out. And once you're happy with it, and then you can say, go ahead and publish that particular model so that you can have your users in various SharePoint sites taking advantage of that. So we'll look at that now, whilst the other ones, that image tagging is happening. So with the model side of things, generally what you get is you get the opportunity to create what we call the content center, right? So this is where the models will actually live, and your training files and so forth. So generally, from a business scenario point of view, is that if you was to train any particular documents, then you probably want to grab a copy of some of those documents, whether that's from finance, HR, or anybody else, so that you could use the real data for positive sampling, as well as some of the negative sampling of it, so that your model is more accurate to process the real files that when you put them into this the simulation. So Content Center is just another SharePoint site. It's got its own libraries, pages, and so forth. And you can see, in the menu system there, I've got models, training files, and so on. So it's just using the SharePoint, basic SharePoint functionality, right? So when I go into models, and there are of course sample models that you could download, import them into your SharePoint, have a play with it. And I've got a few there, right, which is exactly what I've done, right? Just kind of imported some of the samples that's available for us. But if I go into the benefits change notice classifier there, right, that particular sample. So what you get there is basically a wizard, the actions that you can take in order to understand what are your example files that you want to build your model on, And then, of course, go through the classification and training of that, and then also go furthermore to be able to extract various pieces of content from that particular document. So if I go into the trade classifier side of things, so I've got a few documents there, right? And it's quite a busy screen when you look at it, when you look through it. But on the top left, you've got three tabs really: label, train, test. So that's where you got to go through really. So here I've got a few example files, which kind of roughly they're all the same documents, but with different few variables you might have. So that could be your contracts, your agreements. Much of the text remains the same anyway. So you can take advantage of that by uploading your example files in this particular model, and then be able to step through that model to be able to understand exactly if this is going to be a positive or a negative file. And if it is, you can just click yes or no, right? That's all you're doing here, so that you could improve the accuracy for this particular model itself. And that way, you go through a few documents, navigating each of them, and then just mark them for yes or no, right? So once it's done that, you'll come back to, with a label that says it's either positive or negative, and that's fine. So once you've done that, you can then go ahead and then be able to train the model with some explanations, right? So in here, and I must say, right, the experience from here is slightly uh, limited in that sense. So I've got a couple of things. I've got a few explanations that I've created called date of change, which is going to pick up from the date in here somewhere. And then I've got discount, percentage, and so on. So again, to your heart's content, you can pick which particular fields you want to be able to bring out from here. So if I click on addressee, obviously this has already been saved and trained, but it's picking up from this particular document. So I'm just going to come out of that part, and then I'm going to just go quickly show you the explanations that you can build in terms of these templates. So these are all built-in templates that you can use depending on what your document contains. It could be maybe that's the regular expression you might want to take advantage of, 6 to 17 digit numbers, checkbox, credit card, and so on, right? So there's quite a bit of variety in there which you can take, or you could build your own, right? So, if I was to pick one of them here, let's say date numeric, then it kind of gives me that's roughly what the format is going to look like in terms of that phrase list. And then once I try and add this in here, I can then go and say, right, advanced settings, which is the bit we want to be able to see in terms of where this particular date that I'm picking as an explanation, where does that actually occur, right? So you get a few options, whether it's going to be in the beginning of the file, because if you have a structured document already, right, most of this information where it's going to be, right? So it's either beginning, end, or somewhere in the range that you describe it. So you got those two things to think about, and then you can basically pick your match as to what within this each phrase is. So that's the kind of the work you have to do initially upfront when you're trying to design your models to be able to take advantage from your existing documents that are repetitive in nature. So hopefully that reduces the efforts and the overheads from a manual processing side of things. So this is where the content AI can go through that. And so once you've done this training aspect of it, you would then go ahead and just test that out by introducing more test files in your model, so that you could make sure that before you roll it out, that it's all good and valid. Yeah. So I'll come back to my visit, and then once I'm back in there, I can then go furthermore to do things like the extractor and so on. So I'll probably skip that for now, but this is the part that where you might want to basically go to the applying the model to your various libraries. So when I do apply the model, then guess what? You're going to get this familiar choice of which SharePoint sites you want to roll this model out. You would pick your site, add, and job done. And then the background process will take care of it to make it available in that respective SharePoint site within your environment. So let's look at this in reality, how this works. So that's the model construction aspects of it. And just before I leave you from here, what I wanted to show you was these three explanations that I kind of showed you earlier. So essentially in the SharePoint site is going to go and create those columns for you. And therefore, every time when the model is used, when the document's added, it's going to go and then pick out those necessary values. Model settings very quickly. This is where you can take advantage for your compliance, right? So it's not just about classifying and tagging your files, but also you can then say that if this model is used in your SharePoint site, then you could say, well, maybe give a sensitivity label to it. And you could say, well, these are highly confidential documents, so that every time when that's gone in there, it's going to default that. And whatever your policy is for your sensitivity labels, it's going to then go and respect that. Same thing for retentions, right? The lifetime of that document. Not everything should stay permanent in your SharePoint system. So if you have policies like that, bring it on, right? So then you can apply these policies through this model, and therefore everything comes into one place. Your necessary columns are created and so forth. That comes into the environment. So I'm just going to have a quick glance at the chat, and we've still got a few minutes. So I'm just going to make sure. Okay, yeah, nothing there. But thanks, Nut, for keeping an eye as well on the chat. Okay, so I'm going to just go over to the project SharePoint site and go back to the project. So, oh, there we go. So my MVP plane image, that's there now. So that's got aerospace, engineering, and everything else. And funny enough, there's no Seattle in this. I don't think it detected the Space Needle in Seattle. So anyways, that's AI for you. So normally not 100% accurate sometimes, but it's managed to bring all the necessary tags in there. Okay, so benefit notices, which was the model that I was showing you just a little while ago, right? So you can see that it's a document library with files in there, and then there, of course, every model that you publish, it becomes a content type itself. A lot of you should be familiar with that, the powerful nature of that component, but also, when it's published, it's going to create these columns for me. So there's my columns. So all these values you see are actually coming out of the actual document itself. So almost without doing anything, all the values have been picked up within that. So it's just a normal document, like so on. You can see here. So I'm going to close that document and go back to the model here. So if I was to go and bring another file in there, let's pick, go back to my file explorer and go to file. Okay, so just bring that in here. So very similar file to HR benefits change 9. And I'm just going to bring that or sort the order of that so I can keep an eye on it. And that change 9, so there we go. It's in there, date of change is bring that up, discount percentage, addressee, and so on, right? So again, depending on how big your documents are, things could be slower, it might take a while, and so on. So again, that's just a very quick example of how your model is built, published, bring your file into here, and then start taking advantage of your information that can be extracted from the model. So you can do the same for your invoices and so on. So there are different models to achieve that outcome as well. All right. just before I move from here to the knowledge agent, so the taxonomy tagging side of things, it works very much similar to the autofill column you have, except here it takes advantage of your term store. So for SharePoint content service gallery you have, if you're using manage metadata and you've got your terms already set and built, you can use exactly the same manner to actually do that. So if you got documents that mentions any term values or suppliers, customers, then it will go and tag matching your term store value in there as well. So again, that's just one of the many features you have here, but hopefully that's given you a flavor of some of the capabilities within the document processing side of things within the what we call these syntax capabilities. Yeah. All right, so let's go over to knowledge agent side of things. I won't go too much into detail because I know the keynote, Jeff Teeper covered this in detail and there's a demo. And of course, if you do search for this, there's a fresh blog out from last week with a video on the YouTube and all the feature descriptions. So do take a look. But essentially, the knowledge agent public preview kind of addresses some of these challenges, right? To have your content that's ready and be able to prompt if something's not been looked at in terms of the pages that needs retiring, if nobody's looking at it. So therefore, the content is always kind of fresh in there. Of course, the manual governance processes are things. So if you want to then create pages or, have any kind of tagging system that goes on, all that brings into your knowledge agent and still be able to use your prompt techniques and everything else to ask questions and get to it. Key components there, of course, like I mentioned, you can improve the answers. You get this on every SharePoint site once you've turned it on, in terms of getting this on the bottom right of your SharePoint site, homepage, document library, wherever you are, that SharePoint tag will be there so that you could access your knowledge agent preview capabilities. So these are the current options so far. You can summarize the page that you're on, ask a question, improve the site, and you get some of the recommendations, or maybe even organize your document library. So, there's quite a lot of features in there. Some bits are clunky, I think, in my opinion, but then it is a preview, right? So, definitely, have a look at that itself. In order to turn that on, at the moment, it's the PowerShell commandlets you would have to use. So you'll have to ask your SharePoint admin, or if you want, you can simply just go ahead. And of course, if you got the pay-as-you-go, the knowledge agent kind of set up for the Microsoft 365 Copilot, sorry, then only this will work for being able to then opt in to the site. So at the moment, you can do it either for all sites, or you can particularly select, but which is going to come in around 1st of November. So you can then choose individual sites to be able to preview that. So have a look at that. This is all documented there, of course. And of course, if you do want to be part of the overall the developments that's happening, then there's the URL there, aka.ms, join SharePoint AI, so that you can start previewing and probably more capabilities as and when they come, so you can access all these powerful capabilities. So quickly looking at the agent there. So, some of you may have noticed already, if you were following me when I was in my SharePoint sites, that there's my SharePoint icon there at the bottom right, which is basically my knowledge agent, right? So when I click on that within this document library, familiar options I get, ask a question, or organize this library, set up rules, or even create the new view, right? Based on this information there. I've of course got 3 columns that I've already set anyways, part of my syntax capability, but I could go in here and say, organize this library. And then in here, once I do that, I've got a couple of options there, right? So I could go and say, have an agent chat, or I could just go and say, select a file. In this case, I'm not selecting any particular file, but I've selected pretty much all the files there. As soon as I've done that, it's gone and come back with this AI generated columns, which is some of the things that you might have seen in the demos. And you can see, right? Okay, it's a small dev tenant that I've got, so it's come back very quickly. A lot of it will depend on your documents and size of all these things. But look, it's come back with document summary, it's come back with primary technology discussed, and then industry application. So, already, right, compared to the autofill that I showed you for the syntax, they're two different technologies, but here you're using the power of the knowledge agent to be able to bring this up for you, right? So here, then you can, I can then just go and edit my column as I would normally would do that. So I could go and say, you know what, edit this particular column. Underneath, under the hood, it's just a single line of text as a type of column, right? And there's the options there, right? You could see my manual effort with the autofill in syntax. I would have to type the prompt. Here, it's come back with the suggested prompt and therefore the actual answer. So you could tweak that if you wanted to, but it's a good starter. In this case, I've got about 3 columns with 3 prompts and so on. And of course, once I'm happy with it, I could just go ahead and say, save the changes. Simple as that, yeah. And then the rest of it, I think it's more around, what do you want to do with it? If you want to have rules that's already available within this SharePoint site, you can then just ask the chat and be able to create the rules for you, whether that's to send you an email or maybe a date changes or something like that, or maybe do all those things. So take a look at some of these things with the knowledge agent preview that we get. Okay, so that was a quick glimpse around knowledge agent side of things, and kind of coming just towards the end here now to say that, and I always like to use this slide. It is from the Microsoft's Learn area, so whatever you do, whatever you are in your journey, right? They're transparent about it, right? In terms of what specific policies and operational practices they have. So you still got to read up on that if you're comfortable with that. But a lot of it respects all your compliance labels that you might have in place, or any permissions that you might have placed. I know there are good tools and there are some sessions around that might talk about those things. So, make sure you visit those first. But like with everything else, you're only going to get more value out of this if you have good enough data and files in the place. And let's face it, right? We've all been there, right? Nobody's perfect, but it's certainly a time and the effort you would need to put in as part of your governance to make sure that you get more meaningful value for your money's worth in that. And then the pricing side of things, I wanted to just, I did mention earlier, so, this is the kind of things you're working with. So the autofill columns there, for example, 0.005 cents per transaction. So again, a lot of this is chargeable. You can view the builds on this in the environments itself. So again, this is published as well, so you can take a look at that in more detail. eSignatures is around 15 or thereabouts cents in there. Sorry, not 15, my mistake. $2 per request, and you can have up to 10 recipients within that. Right. Okay. So I think I'm up for time and trying to make way for the next speaker. So I hope you took away quite a bit from this session and all the demos and everything else. And it's always nice when the demos work. But I wish you all the best in your journeys of your AI tool sets that you use. Scan the code, and obviously any feedback is appreciated. And of course, do attend more sessions. 12 hours is a long time, so I do want to thank the organizers, the moderators for dealing with this and taking care of the community and basically showcasing everything that there is for the AI native workplace. So with that, thanks very much. Speaking at few events and communities, so if you're able to join, would be great to see you in person. But other than that, thanks very much.